Well, I'm a scientist, and these individuals, my colleagues on this panel, are far more versed in the topic that we're discussing today, and I'm going to try and bring a little bit of a different perspective to it, just from my background as what I do. Without apology, most of my life I've spent in very wild places, and that is what makes me tick. I love being out in wilderness. I love being in environments where there's something out there that can kill me. I live in Missoula, Montana right now for that very purpose. And my graduate school and my education has always been focused on the greenest of, part of the environmental movement, if you will. Protected areas, conservation, all the things you think of when you think of a Discovery Channel show on nature. But I've traveled the world in the work that I do at the Nature Conservancy, and I, like my organization and other conservation organizations, have come to realize that the debate that is going on right now, where we pit people against nature, is really a false dichotomy, like most other dichotomies. And they're really two sides of the same coin. That isn't some utopian view in the sense that you take care of people, nature will be fine, or you take care of nature, people will automatically be fine. It's not that simple. I wish it were, it isn't. But over and over again, particularly in poor countries that I go to, I find two overriding factors. The first is people, particularly poor people, particularly rural poor people, depend upon nature for security. I was in Sri Lanka about 7 days after the tsunami, and I was with a team, and we did the first dives on the coast of Sri Lanka along the national parks and things like that to look at the impact of it. And it was so obvious to me that the people who were hurt the most and who it took the longest to then resettle their lives were the poorest, who had very little chance to replace or very little chance to escape. I also saw again and again cases where intact sand dunes, intact coral reefs, intact mangrove systems mitigating, buffering coastal areas from devastating impacts of a wave 40 foot high traveling at 200 miles an hour. And people have published papers on this and so on and so forth, but that's the case. And the second, of course, is that poor people depend upon nature for services, for food, for water. It's quite remarkable because if you go into very rural poor areas and you ask people, how do you make your living, you find out that the vast majority of what they get, they're just getting it right now from nature. And in some ways getting it for free from nature. So the question is, if they're getting this free from nature, then who is paying ultimately for this? I think the way forward is a really exciting branch of science that is sort of developing. It's social science as well. It's not just the strict biology science, and that's ecosystem services. How do we understand the services nature provides? All of you who live in Aspen frankly live here because of an ecosystem service that this environment provides. It's a recreational service for the most part, but it's a very valuable service that people are willing to pay to live here in this fairly inconvenient place. But the same is true, whether you live in West Africa or whether you live in Asia, nature provides these services. And how do you actually value it, capture those services, and then incorporate it into our models for development, our models for conservation planning, really is the trick. That's where the next big challenge is. Now, it's simple to say this, but it's very tricky to actually do for probably two reasons. I'll just mention this and just sort of shut up and let you talk. The first is the way people value services depends on where they live, frankly. The value of water for someone who's filling their swimming pool in Santa Barbara is very different from the value of water for a woman who is hauling it from a little stream in Uganda. And how they replace it becomes very, very tricky. Right now, today, in the New York Times is a picture of my town, Missoula, Montana. It's amazing. It's in there. And there's a story in there with this photograph of a river that is being restored. It's the largest Superfund site in the country, and it's right in Missoula. I mean, I can see it from my place virtually. And what they're doing is they're taking out this dam that's been in there for 100 years, and they're allowing the Clark Fork and the Bitterroot to flow once again. This is the river runs through it of, Norm Maclean's book, right? The river is once again going to run because of this. What's interesting is even though I live within a stone throw of this river, the Clark Fork, I actually don't drink water from the Clark Fork because it has huge amounts of heavy metal toxic sediments from years and years of mining activities in Montana. But Missoula is like one of these places where quality of life is really high because we just import the water in. We pump it, we bring it, we transport, we ship it. We don't drink it from that river. Now, if I was living anywhere else in most of the world, I wouldn't have that choice. But I have that choice because of where I live. And so how you pay for services really depends on where you live. And that's a tricky question. The second one is, whenever you start putting value on a service, the higher that value gets, the problem becomes that certain stakeholders end up capturing more and more and more of it. You might try and do this for the right reasons because you're trying to bring value because poor people are just getting left out of the game. But as that value rises, once again, those in power, those who have the means, will find a way to capture that. And you will once again not really end up serving the people you're really trying to serve and protect the environment you're really trying to protect. And that's a social trick. And I'm not sure how you get out of it, but it's there. And as soon as a service, as soon as something starts valuing up, the people you're really trying to help somehow get once again squeezed out. So with those two caveats, I really think that the science of ecosystem services, how you value service, how you incorporate that into conservation, into development, really points the way forward in terms of environmental equality for all.